The writer's strike has shut down late-night TV, but we're laughing more than ever. Platforms like the Babylon Bee are still crushing it. Consider headlines like this. Baby gains the powers of an old man after being bitten by Biden. It's good stuff. Got podcasts, YouTube channels, Blaze TV, and other outlets. Well, they're filling the gaps left behind by both the writer's strike and, of course, conformist Hollywood. Now we've got the actors striking as well. Oh, but would Saturday Night Live ever air a clip like this, poking fun at fitness for fascists?
Recently, MSNBC posted an article associating fitness with the far right. Personally, I think fitness should be for everyone, so I want to give you guys some quick tips on how I personally fend off some of those ideas while I'm in the gym getting ripped. I usually like to get started with some cardio on the elliptical. Around the 7-minute mark, you'll generally find the voices in your head will probably start to kick in. When this happens, I generally turn off the elliptical, turn the music up a little bit, give your head a little tap with one of these. Not today. If it's leg day at that point, I usually pop over to the squat rack, start getting it in. Sometimes by the squat rack, you'll notice a couple guys handing out pamphlets to join the National Socialist Party of Germany, which will give you time for one quick set of 5 or 6 before they have time to make their pitch. With those guys handing out pamphlets, it's probably time to switch to lunges. Now, if the voices kick in again, it might be time to switch to podcasts, potentially NPR or the Manifesto on tape, skipping the parts where they talk about land. And tell the voices it's going to be an upper...
Well, Ryan Long did, and he wrote, shot, and published that clip within 24 hours of that insane MSNBC article. That's the power of the internet. Yet comedy on the big screen clearly remains on life support. 2 films released by some very funny people, Bert Kreischer and Sebastian Maniscalco, both bombed just a few weeks ago. And then more recently we had Joyride, which was a festival favorite and the critics loved it. It also bombed. I think the only recent good news, and put that in scare quotes, is No Hard Feelings. That one may reach around the $50 million mark stateside when all the dust settles. It's the closest we've had to an old-school, hard R-rated comedy in quite some time. And kudos to Jennifer Lawrence for starring in it and pushing it forward. But movie comedies clearly remain an endangered species. And we know why. At least partly why. Could you make Superbad today? You got 3 horny white teenagers trying to do whatever it takes to be cool and score with some ladies? I don't think that's going to work. You could start with the white privilege cries and segue into the whole male gaze situation. You're laughing yet? Of course not. Now, the subject of movie comedies is on the mind of a lot of funny people, including Joe Rogan, who has discussed it on his podcast, and especially those who make comedies for a living. They care about the subject. I'm sure they've grown up watching great movies, Step Brothers, old school things like that. They want to make some of their own, but it's not as easy as it once was. That brings us to Adam Devine. And if you don't know the name, he's certainly not a superstar, but you've seen him in the Pitch Perfect movies. He was on Workaholics for many seasons. He was also at a very good arc on Modern Family. He's everywhere these days. He's also the voice of Pizza Steve on Uncle Grandpa, which is a very funny cartoon. Now he's promoting a new film called The Outlaws. He's co-starring in it. It's an action comedy. Also features Pierce Brosnan. Here's a sneak peek of the film.
My parents just emailed that they're coming to our wedding.
Oh, I get to meet your parents finally. Are you psyched? You're not psyched. Are you psyched at all? Is there any psych happening?
Sitting on top of the world, I'm up.
You haven't met this woman's parents yet? They've been off the grid the whole time we've been together.
It's going down, baby, what's up?
Hey! Billy and Lily McDermott. Meet my parents.
Pleasure to meet you, Neil.
You're very attractive.
Oh, thank you.
That's not a compliment. For me, it's too much.
You deserve something better than that pasty little goober.
Dad, just give him a chance.
All right, full confession. I watched about 20 or so minutes of The Outlaws and I bailed. Devine is a funny guy, but he's trying way too hard here, and the jokes, the material just isn't there to support him. He opened up about the issue with Theo Von, very funny comedian, on Theo Von's podcast called This Past Weekend. And they talked about the sorry state of modern movie comedies, like we just said. And the few that are out there are often not very funny. I mean, just quick, when was the last big screen comedy that made you laugh? I mean, you really have to stretch back a bit just to find the really funny stuff. Now, Devine thinks part of the problem is that audiences expect too much when they go to the theaters these days. He says, you know what, the Marvel movies, gosh, they can cost around $200 million. When you buy your ticket and you sit in your seat, you expect something spectacular to unfold before you. You want a lot of bang for your buck. And I think that makes a bit of sense because a Marvel movie, even a bad one, is going to have a lot of spectacle, a lot of special effects. You can see the money on the screen. You go see a comedy. I mean, a comedy should cost anywhere between $10 million and maybe $40 million. That's not a lot of money on the screen. And perhaps people are just thinking, I'll wait till it comes home. I could watch it at home and not pay the exorbitant prices. It's a theory. I think that makes some sense. I don't think he's crazy for saying so. But he also touches on something else when it comes to movie comedies and why they're not really scoring right now. And I think this factor could be a really significant reason for the lack of big screen laughs these days. He says Hollywood wants comedies to send a message. And while Devine won't say it, we will. It's woke or bust. Let's let him describe what he means.
And the crazy thing is it feels like people need comedy more than ever.
Yeah, I feel like they want it. So that's what this movie was. It was like, there's no like hidden message. I feel like nowadays, people like you get to the end of what you think is a comedy, and you're like, is that about global warming?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, is there like some deep hidden message that I'm supposed to recycle more, or like, there has to be something else.
Right. The moon is trans? Is that what? Yeah. Is that the surprise ending?
Yeah, you're like, okay, I guess we do have to think about that, don't we? Yeah. My job now is kind of, well, obviously acting and that kind of stuff, but then like I'm pitching a lot, so I'll like pitch movies. And every executive is like, yeah, but why should we make this movie now? And you're like, because it's funny.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, bitch. What do you mean? Like, whatever happened to just like, we want to make people laugh? Like, it doesn't need to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't need to attach itself to some like hook in the world right now.
It doesn't. I mean, if it does and that's the movie, then sure.
Right.
But it doesn't always have to. It could just be like, whatever happened to just, it's funny for funny's sake.
I know.
I think that makes sense. Now, we've got the current writer's strike, we've got the actors striking as well, and that offers a chance for right-leaning platforms to prove Devine's point and make a difference. Now, the writer's strike is not directly impacting some platforms like the Daily Wire, Blaze TV, and Angel Studios. They're not falling to the union rules, so they can still crank out original content while everyone else is taking a knee, and that could be a very long knee. I mean, all the indications are these strikes, these dual strikes, are going to last a long time. Why can't the Daily Wire put out a politically incorrect comedy, something that mocks the woke bylaws? How cool would that be? Maybe Blaze TV could build on its first original comedy. It came out a few weeks ago called Reopening. Very funny. They could have their own film taking on today's snowflakes. Again, good stuff. Now, neither of these outlets could really crank out a hard R-rated comedy like we used to watch. It just doesn't go with their values, their brands. It doesn't make sense. But it still leaves room for some stinging satire, maybe just jokes the mainstream media won't tell. Maybe we get a comedy or two with no messages at all, like Devine is looking for, and maybe a respite from our daily doom and gloom. I think that would hit the spot. When the writers and the actors finally go back to work, the Hollywood landscape could look a lot different. New rules will be in place, and the creators will have to tell their best stories possible to get audiences back and also to help studios pay off those bills. I think both sides are going to be really hurting financially after the strike. Imagine if conservative platforms spent those strike months raising their games and delivering the kinds of comedies Hollywood once made a lot of, but now they're too afraid to share. All of this doesn't mean comedy can't be found these days. Yeah, I get it. It's hard to spot at the big screen. But you can still see and hear very funny stuff that doesn't obey the woke bylaws. Here's a few tips. If you miss Howard Stern's Take No Prisoners approach, the old one, the one he used to do, check out the Tim Dillon Show. He's a little bit cranky, but in a good way. He sounds like vintage Stern, of course without the whack pack by his side. Dillon plays devil's advocate at times. He refuses to bow to any cultural mores for sure. You're going to wince a time or two. And of course, he's funny enough to pull it off. Now, Opie and Anthony alum Anthony Cumia can be found at Compound Media. That's his oasis from the censors. He built it himself. Got tired of being canceled one too many times. Can't blame him. But just be warned, this is as raw as comedy gets in the 21st century. You'll need a very thick skin to appreciate his humor, but it's worth it. The Babylon Bee has a podcast as well, and it is very funny. I love Adam Yenzer's canceled news segment, and also they riff on the latest headlines. It's also squeaky clean, with anything close to profanity being bleeped out and very funny ways. But if you love political banter mixed with laughs, well, I've got 2 shows for you. The Andrew Klavan Show starts with a great monologue each week. This is amazing political satire, delivered with the stand-up comedian's touch and sense of timing. Here, Andrew explains the serious trouble Hunter Biden still faces under the Garland regime.
While the plea deal ends this 5-year phase of the Hunter Biden investigation, Attorney General Merrick Icepick Willie Garland says the DOJ is still looking into other possible charges against the president's son and bagman. For instance, after Hunter left the body of a dead hooker in a Bangkok gutter, he may be charged with littering. After Hunter hurried across a street to deliver a duffel bag filled with Ukrainian greenbacks to his father, he may be charged with jaywalking. And after Hunter spent 6 weeks so stoned on crack cocaine he couldn't find the library, he could be forced to pay $32 in overdue fines.
The show itself is much more serious and often faith-based, but Klavan's wit is never far from the surface, and that matters. But I think the funniest political podcast around is the Ruthless variety Progrum. Yeah, Progrum, that's how they pronounce it. 4 Beltway insiders break down the latest headlines with insights you will not hear anywhere else, really, truthfully. They know what they're talking about, but they're never wonky about it, and their chemistry is off the charts. That's probably the best part of the whole show. You're going to laugh a lot throughout the program. You're also going to learn about our crazy political landscape. I mean, even people who know their stuff, and I feel like I know certain things. I'm always getting new information here. I think it's the best antidote for our troubled times, and they are indeed troubled. You may hate seeing America being steered directly into a ditch, but when you're listening to the program, you'll still smile.